Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's Hacks. I'm here today with another tier list video. First one in 8 months. The tier list that you're seeing on screen right now was the one I released 8 months ago. And most notably, that tier list had Yoshi moved to above Peach, which was somewhat of a newfound sentiment at the time due to AMSA's successes at tournaments like the Big House 10. AMSA finished last year really strong, ranked number 2 in the world overall, and I think it made a lot of people reevaluate Yoshi as a character and recognize him as a tournament threat. So that was the primary reason for my new Yoshi placement, and something that I mentioned in that video, for those who remember it, is that I promised that I would make a new tier list video whenever the order of my tier list was swapped, meaning if there was even one swap, I would make a new video, because realistically, swaps aren't going to happen that often anymore. And so we're going to jump straight into today's video. You'll see what the swap is. I think a lot of people will find it interesting, but nonetheless, we're going to go into today's video. And so we're going to start with the exact 12, it's still the exact 12 characters, the exact same 12 characters that I've been ranking for the past few years. Eventually, I'll probably do a tier list video that incorporates some of the characters directly below, or maybe even a full tier list video, but for now, I'm sticking to my tried and true. And so, we'll start off with Fox. Nothing's changed, nothing ever will change. Fox is the best in the game. I think that's just almost universally agreed on at this point. It was doubted for a while. Some said it was Marth, some said it was Puff, but I think it's coming full circle now that Fox is definitely the best in the game, especially if you look at tournaments like the Coin Box series that Hungrybox has been hosting this year, how often that tournament will have like 5 Foxes in its top 8. And I actually think that's a byproduct of the Slippy era, basically giving this character all the resources that he needs to show why he's the best. Fox is the best when the game has resources like rollback netcode and people are able to grind endlessly and just constantly evolve the level of play. There's just no question that Fox is the best character in this game. Next, we're going to put Marth in the number 2 spot. I think this is the widely agreed top 2, although some disagree with it, but right now, this is pretty standard. Reasoning for Marth's number 2 placement, he is more than likely the best character in the game against Fox. There's really only one other character who could potentially hold a candle to Marth in that department, that character being Falco. However, Marth is stronger than Falco into several of the other characters, most notably the floaties, like Jigglypuff and Peach. And so I think that differentiates the two for now, in terms of Marth getting the number 2 position. Falco is a character who doesn't really beat many characters. He's just very well-rounded. For the most part, he has 5-5 matchups against practically the entire cast, which is great. Having 5-5 matchups against the cast is a good trait to have. But Marth not only has a 5-5 matchup against Fox, but he also beats quite a few of the other characters, which Falco doesn't. So for now, we're going to give the number 2 spot to Marth. Next, this is what I was highlighting earlier. This is the current swap that I'm officially putting on my tier list. I'm putting Sheik at number 3. Now, for the people who've been following my tier lists for years and years, some of you might find this crazy. Some of my earlier tier lists had Sheik really low. I remember putting her as low as below Peach at one point during like the Armada era. But with the way the metagame has evolved, Sheik is actually, in my opinion, a much stronger character than I once thought. Even against Fox, she's really not that bad at all, due to traits such as her huge shield, making it so that you can almost never poke her shield, and the fact that her tilts are among the only moves in the game that can actually scrap with Fox. Pretty much the only characters who can win close quarters scraps with Fox are the Spaceys, Sheik, and then Peach through the use of down smash. But Sheik is definitely capable of scrapping with Fox, and so I don't think that matchup's as bad as I once thought it to be. I think in the past when I was ranking her low, I viewed it as 40-60, but now I view it as about 45-55. So that brings me to why I'm putting Sheik above Falco. If Sheik has a 45-55 matchup against Fox, and Falco has closer to a 5-5 matchup, although I think he loses by a little, but closer to a 5-5 matchup for Falco, then why am I putting Sheik above him? It comes down to the Marth matchup. So this is the main thing that I want to propose the theory behind, because I think this might become a very real thing going forward, is the possibility of an endgame triangle between these top three characters, between Fox, Marth, and Sheik. And also the possibility of the dual main strategy of Fox with Sheik as a backup. So, if, let's say, we agree that Fox is the best in the game, which is probably agreed on by like 90% of people at this point, and then if Marth has the best Fox matchup in the game and therefore gets the number 2 spot, then the way these tier lists tend to play out is that whoever has the most merit into the best characters is going to be worthy of the number 3 position. So, why am I putting Sheik above Falco for now? Because, to be clear, I think Falco is roughly even into both Fox and Marth, whereas Sheik is more so 45-55 into Fox and 55-45 into Marth. It has to do with the fact that if a character like Falco is even into these two, but Sheik is 5% loss against Fox and 5% win against Marth, then I view Sheik as having more merit in the endgame. And the reason for that is because of the winning Marth matchup. Because if the best strategy in the game is to play Fox, since he has the best matchup spread against the entire cast, but then if there's potentially a better character than Fox against Marth, that being Sheik, then that shows the merit in the Fox-Sheik dual main strategy. Another bizarre dual main strategy that I think would have merit for similar reasons is Fox with a Yoshi backup. That's something I'm going to talk about eventually, is that for all the talk about Marth having the best matchup in the game against Fox, I actually think there are very few characters in the game that have a better Marth matchup than Fox. Some of the only contenders really are Sheik, Yoshi, and maybe Captain Falcon. I think Sheik and Yoshi are the top 2 contenders. But the reason the Fox-Sheik dual main strategy, I think, would realistically see more usage, it's for a few reasons. One of them is actually the fact that these two characters have 3-frame jump squat, so switching between them is a lot more seamless than switching from Fox to a 5-frame jump squat character or a 4-frame jump squat character. Furthermore, switching to Yoshi is really bizarre. Yoshi just doesn't really feel right as a dual main because of how differently he plays from every other character in the game. So I think that's why, realistically, if someone were to pick up a dual main for the Marth matchup, the most likely choice would be Sheik out of those 3 that I listed. So that shows that Sheik actually has a lot of endgame merit, and while it's not even guaranteed that that would be the best strategy, meaning Fox with a dual main being better than just going solo Fox, because the argument in favor of going solo Fox is you could just make your solo Fox as good as possible. If you're devoting any time to a dual main, your solo Fox is probably going to be a little less good. But if you really want to win the Marth matchup, then I see the merit in that lineup. So that's why I'm currently putting Falco fourth, because while I've said many times that Falco's a very well-rounded character who doesn't really lose to anybody, he also doesn't have much endgame merit. I can't really think of any reason that you would play Falco in any matchup over Fox, for example, except for Captain Falcon, which is something I'm going to get to. But for now, this is the order that I'm giving to these top 4 characters. And to be clear, when the game first came out, like in 2001, 2002, people had concluded within the first few months of the game that these were the 4 best. What's interesting is that for a while people contended it. For a while people thought maybe Puff's in that league. Maybe Puff is better than some of these characters. But I think things are circling back to these really being the top 4, with Fox as the guaranteed lock as the best, and then the order of these 3 being most debatable. So right now, that's the order that I'm giving to 2 through 4. It's Marth, then Sheik, and then Falco. Lowest placement I've given to Falco, I think, in a good while. But for now, I'm really seeing Sheik become a stronger character than I once thought, and the merit in the Marth matchup is there, like I was saying. So then, up next is Puff. In my previous tier list, and I believe a few of the ones before that, I put Captain Falcon above Puff. Now, I do think it's really close between these two, to be clear. And I think that if the skill level continues to rise, then it's still on the table for sure that Captain Falcon goes above her. But for now, the reason I'm putting Puff in the number 5 position mostly has to do with the fact that she's considerably better into Sheik and Falco. Earlier I was mentioning that Falco doesn't really win any matchups. Well, he does against Captain Falcon. That's the one exception. I'm putting Captain Falcon at the lowest point, at the lowest of these 6. These are the 6 that I'm giving the S tier ranking, mainly because he's the only character that actually loses to Falco. And furthermore, the only matchup that he really wants to draw out of these characters above him is Marth. I think he's fine into Marth the whole time that I was playing him, which was like an 8-year period. I actually used to think he beat Marth. Now I'd say it's even. But the point is, he doesn't really have any good draws. Marth is the only... Marth is like fine. Puff might only be a slight loss. But Captain Falcon is definitely bad into 3 characters, those being Fox, Sheik, and Falco. Whereas Puff is bad into 2. Puff is bad into Marth, to Fox and Marth. So you could argue, like the argument for Captain Falcon being above Puff, which is totally on the table, is that the Fox-Marth aggregate is the most important. Like, if you're valuing the aggregate against Fox and Marth more than anything else, then Captain Falcon goes above her. But I do think Sheik and Falco matter by enough that I would put Puff above him for now. I would also be inclined to say that Jigglypuff beats Falcon by a very marginal amount, and so I think that solidifies it in my mind for now. Next, we have the Yoshi placement. Oh, and something interesting that I forgot to mention is that I'm only doing 3 tiers this time around. In the past, I had 4 tiers. I've trimmed it down to 3, which I think is good. I think 3 is realistically the lowest number that it could ever be. It's between like 3 and 4 categories in my mind, but for now I'm doing 3, with the S tier being the definitive top contenders, and then A tier being characters you probably will not win a tournament, but it could still happen. So within that tier, within that A tier, I still have Yoshi as number 7 in the game. Now, Yoshi, in the past, I've considered grouping him with characters like Puff and Captain Falcon, but the reason that I'm grouping him here for now is I thought about it, and Yoshi is actually the only character that I've ranked yet that Captain Falcon definitively beats. Captain Falcon does not beat, like for certain, he does not beat any of the characters that are ranked above him on this list, but he does beat Yoshi. The next problem with Yoshi is he also loses to Peach. So, between the fact that he loses to those two, which no one else yet on the tier list does, to be clear, Captain Falcon does not lose to any of the top, does not beat any of the top 5. Peach also does not beat anyone up here, except maybe Falco. Maybe, but it's probably even. But the point being, Yoshi loses to these two characters. And so, that, in my mind, solidifies Yoshi as an A-tier character rather than an S-tier. Now, as for why he's going above Peach, it's because while he loses the head-to-head, he does have a better chance overall at solo winning the tournament. And that's mainly because of Peach's infamous roadblock matchups, main one being Jigglypuff. I would say Peach is also quite a bit roadblocked against characters like Marth. Puff and Marth come to mind the most, but really Peach is quite disadvantaged against like 5 of these characters, whereas Yoshi arguably beats Marth, which is excellent, and he also is able to hold his own against Jigglypuff, which Peach just hardly can do at all. So I do put Yoshi above Peach. I do still believe in that, but I think that earlier this year I may have overrated him by a little bit, mainly because of Om's recent successes, building a little too much of a hype train in my mind. I think now that hype train has died down a little, and so while I do put him above Peach, I still got him in the second tier of characters. Third, we have Ice Climbers. I've always said that the A tier kind of just orders itself from here, with Peach going above Climbers, Climbers going above Pikachu. And it's just hard to ever break that order because of how skewed these matchups are. Peach dominates Climbers, Climbers dominates Pika. So that's been my order for a very long time, and I don't think anything's changing there. I think within these 4 characters, the only one who really poses a chance of winning nowadays is Yoshi, but like I said, he's not really good enough to go into the tier that's above. Reason being, Peach has numerous roadblocks. Ice Climbers, they have numerous roadblocks. Peach is actually like their biggest one. And Pikachu, forget it. He almost folds at this point to the floatier characters. I view it as being practically impossible to win a tournament with Pikachu. It's possible that in the future I may find some category that puts Yoshi above like some of these, but for now I think this is okay, because I think if we're to keep this to 3 categories, which like I said is the lowest it could go, then this is pretty solidly what it would be in my mind. And I like to minimize the number of categories, just so it's more condensed and just agreeable overall. So now in the 11th place spot, we have Samus. Samus has been getting underrated lately. I've seen a lot of tier lists on Twitter that put characters like DK and Dr. Mario above her. In my mind, there's no shot, because Samus will always have the merit of being really good into Fox for a character who's this low on the tier list. She still loses, don't get me wrong, but she loses by a small enough margin that's quite frankly shocking. It's unusual for a character that's going to get a ranking this low. So I still got her in the 11th place spot, and then of course in number 12 we have Luigi. Luigi is just not particularly good into anybody, but in my mind he's distinctly better than characters who would come below him on the tier list if I were to continue, which I will in the future. I think people would find it interesting to see me do a full tier list. If I ever do another tier list video, I will do either the mid tiers. I will either include like the mid tiers, like the next row, or I'll do a full tier list. More likely it'll be a full tier list, which I think people will find really interesting. But for now, I'll say that Luigi is definitively better than the other Mario Bros, just because he's way more explosive. Those two are telegraphed. I don't think they can really compete at all against like the top tiers. Luigi can still kind of hold his own just because his wave dash will always be one of the most individually broken traits in the game. So it's good enough to keep him on this top 12. But for now, that's my tier list, most notably highlighted by the Sheik placement and the possibility of this endgame triangle between Fox, Marth, and Sheik. And aside from that, notable for the fact that I trimmed it down to 3 categories. Hope y'all enjoyed the video. Make sure to like and subscribe. Leave your comments in the box below, and have a good one.